She thought she had the perfect marriage, a tech billionaire husband, a baby on the way, and a future that sparkled like the Silicon Valley skyline. But one viral TikTok video would shatter everything she believed about love, loyalty, and the man sleeping beside her. What started as a simple scroll through social media became a nightmare that 2 million strangers witnessed in real time. Her husband wasn't just cheating, he was flaunting his affair while she carried his child, humiliating her on a scale that would make international headlines. But this isn't just another story about infidelity. This is about a woman who discovered that her husband's betrayal was hiding something far more sinister. Federal crimes that would bring down his empire and expose a web of lies that reached into the highest levels of Silicon Valley. When the FBI finally stormed into that courtroom, nobody was prepared for what they would uncover. Not the reporters, not the judge, and certainly not the pregnant mistress live streaming the whole thing on Instagram. This is the story of how one woman's worst humiliation became her greatest weapon, and why sometimes the most devastating betrayals become the foundation for the most powerful comebacks. Sophia Reynolds stared at her phone screen in disbelief, her 7-month pregnant belly pressing against the kitchen counter of their Palo Alto mansion. The TikTok video had already gained 2 million views in 6 hours, and the comments were brutal. There was her husband, Mason Blackwell, arms wrapped around red-haired influencer Amber Collins at what looked like an exclusive Coachella after-party, their bodies pressed together in a way that left no room for interpretation. The timestamp showed last weekend, while Sophia had been home with severe morning sickness, managing his business calendar and planning their baby shower. She had spent Saturday organizing gift bags for guests while Mason claimed to be networking at a critical tech conference. She had trusted him completely, even feeling grateful that he was building their future while she rested. The comments section was a nightmare of public humiliation. "Where's his pregnant wife, though?" read the top comment with 15,000 likes. "This girl is way hotter than his wife," replied another with 8,000 hearts. "Rich men always trade up once the wife gets fat," added a third that made Sophia's chest tighten with shame. She scrolled through hundreds of similar remarks, each one cutting deeper than the last. Strangers were dissecting her marriage, her appearance, her worth as a woman, all while she carried Mason's child. The viral nature of the betrayal made it infinitely worse than private infidelity. Millions of people were witnessing her humiliation, and many seemed to take pleasure in it. Her hands trembled as she read comment after comment speculating about their relationship. "She probably doesn't know yet. Someone should tell the pregnant wife. Imagine finding out your husband is cheating through TikTok." The cruelty of strangers felt almost as devastating as Mason's betrayal itself. Mason walked through the front door at that exact moment, whistling cheerfully and carrying his weekend bag. He looked refreshed, energetic, completely unburdened by the crushing weight now sitting on Sophia's chest. His expensive suit was perfectly pressed, his hair styled with the casual confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. "Hey, babe," he called out with practiced warmth, setting down his bag and loosening his tie. "How was your weekend? Sorry I couldn't call much. The conference schedule was absolutely insane. Back-to-back meetings with investors who could change everything for us." The ease of his lies was breathtaking. He spoke with such conviction about investor meetings while video evidence of his affair spread across the internet. Sophia wondered how long he had been perfecting this level of deception, how many other lies she had accepted without question, without speaking. She turned her phone screen toward him. The video played automatically, showing Mason and Amber in their intimate embrace while party music pulsed in the background. Mason's face went through a series of micro-expressions that Sophia had never learned to read: surprise that seemed almost performative, quick calculation behind his eyes, then practiced innocence settling over his features like a mask. "Oh, that," he said with a dismissive wave that seemed rehearsed. "Amber was networking for our new app launch. You know how these industry events work, right? Everything looks different through social media filters. People take pictures out of context all the time." The gaslighting hit her like a physical blow. Here was video evidence of his betrayal, witnessed by millions of strangers, and somehow she was the problem for interpreting it correctly. "Mason, you're holding her like she's your girlfriend. At 2 in the morning. This isn't networking." Mason's jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in his casual facade. When he spoke again, his tone carried a subtle edge of irritation, as if her reasonable concerns were an inconvenience to his carefully planned narrative. Sophia, you're being paranoid, and honestly, it's concerning. Pregnancy hormones can make women see things that aren't there. It's actually pretty common. Amber is my business partner. Period. We've been working 18-hour days trying to close this funding round. The medical gaslighting was particularly cruel. He was weaponizing her pregnancy against her, suggesting that her biology made her incapable of accurately interpreting reality. It was a tactic designed to make her doubt her own senses and defer to his superior judgment. Look at the comments. Mason, everyone can see what's happening in this video. Millions of people are talking about this. Comments from random internet trolls. He laughed, but the sound held no warmth. Since when do we base our marriage on what anonymous strangers think you're sabotaging my company with jealousy? Sophia, this app launch could be worth $50 million, and you're willing to destroy it over your insecurities. The manipulation was masterful in its cruelty. He had transformed her legitimate concerns about his infidelity into an attack on their financial future. According to Mason's narrative, Sophia wasn't a betrayed wife seeking answers. She was a hysterical pregnant woman whose jealousy threatened their prosperity. Sophia felt the familiar doubt creeping in, the psychological conditioning that had been building for months without her awareness. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe pregnancy was affecting her judgment. Mason was brilliant, successful, driven. He had built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. Would he really risk everything for an affair? I'm sorry, she heard herself saying, the words escaping before she could stop them. You're right. I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions based on one video. Mason's smile returned instantly, warm and reassuring, as if her apology had restored the natural order of their relationship. He crossed the kitchen with confident strides and kissed her forehead, his hand resting possessively on her swollen belly. That's my girl, he murmured against her hair. I know pregnancy is making everything feel more intense, but you have to trust me. Stress isn't good for the baby, and we need to think about what's best for our family. As Sophia climbed the stairs to their bedroom, exhaustion weighing her down, she didn't see Mason immediately pulling out a second phone, the one she didn't know existed. She didn't see his fingers typing rapidly. Close call. She saw the Coachella video but bought the business partner explanation. We need to be more careful about public displays. The response came back within seconds, accompanied by a kissy face emoji. Can't wait to celebrate our real partnership tonight. Same hotel room. Mason smiled and typed back, always. But we stick to the plan. Everything stays private until the app launch is complete and I can handle the divorce properly. In her bedroom, Sophia lay on her side, feeling their baby kick restlessly against her ribs. Her maternal instincts were screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. But Mason's confidence was so absolute, his explanations so reasonable. He was a master manipulator who had spent months conditioning her to doubt her own perceptions while he systematically betrayed their marriage. This was her first crushing defeat, though she didn't fully comprehend its significance yet. The evidence was literally viral, seen by millions, but Mason had convinced her to question her own eyes. He had weaponized her pregnancy hormones, their financial future, and her desire to trust her husband against her legitimate concerns about his fidelity. The foundation of their marriage was cracking, but Sophia was too deep in the psychological manipulation to recognize the extent of the damage. Mason had won this round completely, leaving Sophia more isolated and vulnerable than ever before, primed for the even greater betrayals that would follow. 2 days after the TikTok incident, Mason launched an elaborate charm offensive that would have impressed seasoned relationship experts. He arrived home with an armful of white roses, Sophia's favorite since their first date, and an envelope containing reservations at Auberge du Soleil, the luxury resort in Napa Valley where they had spent their honeymoon. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, settling beside her on their Italian leather sofa with practiced sincerity. Maybe I have been working too much lately. The baby is coming soon, and I want to focus on our family. Really focus, not just say the words. The vulnerability in his voice was so convincing that Sophia felt her chest tighten with relief. This was the Mason she had fallen in love with 3 years ago, the one who remembered small details about her preferences and made grand romantic gestures that swept her off her feet. The man who had once driven 4 hours to surprise her with her favorite cheesecake when she was stressed about a work presentation. I already rescheduled all my meetings for next week, he continued, taking her hands in his with the gentle pressure she remembered from their early dating days. Canceled the investor dinner on Thursday, moved the board meeting to the following month. It'll be just us, reconnecting before our son arrives. Sophia's eyes filled with tears of relief. Maybe she had been wrong about everything. Maybe the stress of pregnancy and his demanding work schedule had created problems where none existed. Mason was looking at her with the same intensity that had made her fall in love with him, the gaze that made her feel like the most important person in his universe. Mason, I was so scared these past few weeks. I thought I was losing you to your work, and then that video made me think terrible things. Never, he said firmly, pulling her close enough that she could smell his familiar cologne mixed with something that might have been another woman's perfume, though she pushed that thought away. You and this baby are my whole world. Sophia, I'm sorry if my ambition made you feel otherwise. Success means nothing if I lose my family. The weekend in Napa Valley was orchestrated to perfection, every detail calculated to restore Sophia's faith in their marriage. Mason was attentive in ways he hadn't been for months, rubbing her swollen feet without being asked, ordering room service when she felt too tired for restaurants, and spending hours talking about their future as parents with enthusiasm that seemed completely genuine. He researched pregnancy massage techniques on his phone and spent an evening learning to ease the tension in her lower back. He downloaded pregnancy apps to track their baby's development and read aloud about fetal growth milestones while she dozed against his shoulder. For the first time in months, Sophia felt cherished rather than tolerated. On their final evening, as they sat on their hotel balcony overlooking endless rows of grapevines, Mason pulled out his phone with what seemed like genuine reluctance. Just documenting this moment, he explained, snapping photos of them together against the sunset. I want our son to know how happy we were before he arrived. I want him to see that his parents were deeply in love. Within minutes, the photos were posted across his social media platforms with captions that made Sophia's heart swell. Baby moon bliss with my beautiful wife. Read the Instagram post. Can't wait to meet our little guy and start the greatest adventure of our lives. The responses poured in immediately. Congratulations flooded the comments section. Heart emojis from business associates. Messages about what a perfect couple they made. Sophia scrolled through the positive feedback with growing satisfaction, feeling vindicated in her decision to trust Mason's explanations about the Coachella video. See, Mason said, noticing her reading the comments with a smile. This is our real story, babe. Not some random party video taken completely out of context by people who don't know us. But what Sophia didn't know was that Amber Collins had been blocked from seeing these posts through carefully adjusted privacy settings. While Mason was love-bombing his wife in public, he was maintaining their affair through encrypted messaging apps that left no trace on his primary phone. His texts to Amber during the Napa weekend were masterfully compartmentalized. Playing the devoted husband this weekend. Give me 2 weeks to let the social media buzz die down, then we're back to normal operations. The app launch timeline hasn't changed. Amber's responses showed her growing impatience with the secrecy. I hate watching you play happy family online when I'm the one who actually understands your ambitions. How much longer do I have to pretend to be just a business partner? Not much longer, Mason replied between romantic dinners with Sophia. Once the funding is secured, I can handle the wife situation more permanently. Everything we're building together is worth this temporary inconvenience. The false safety was intoxicating for Sophia. For the first time in months, she slept peacefully through the night, convinced that her marriage was solid and her fears had been the product of pregnancy-induced paranoia. She started planning the nursery with renewed enthusiasm, researching baby names with meaning, and imagining family vacations to places Mason had mentioned wanting to visit. Mason maintained the facade with professional-level consistency for 10 days after their return to Palo Alto. He worked from home more frequently, helped assemble baby furniture with apparent enthusiasm, and spoke about fatherhood with a conviction that seemed to come from genuine excitement about their future. He even suggested they start a college fund for their son, opening a joint savings account that made Sophia feel financially secure for the first time since her pregnancy began. The gesture seemed to prove that he was thinking long-term about their family's future, planning for their child's success decades in advance. Sophia called her father Frank in Denver to share the positive changes she was observing. Dad, I think Mason and I worked through our rough patch. He's been incredible lately. More present, more excited about the baby. I think becoming a father is really changing his priorities. Frank Reynolds, a pragmatic construction company owner who had built his business on reading people accurately, kept his concerns to himself, but couldn't shake his unease about Mason's sudden transformation. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Just remember that consistency over time matters more than grand gestures. Real change happens gradually, not all at once. I know, Dad, but he's really different. I can feel it in how he touches my belly when he talks to the baby, how he researches everything about infant development. He's already talking about teaching our son to throw a baseball. Frank hoped his daughter was right, but decades of experience with unreliable subcontractors had taught him that men who could lie convincingly about small things usually lied about big things too. Mason's charm had always felt calculated rather than genuine, but Frank had kept those observations to himself to avoid interfering in his daughter's happiness. Meanwhile, Mason was already planning his return to normal operations. The love bombing had worked perfectly, restoring Sophia's trust and buying him the emotional space he needed to resume his double life with more sophisticated operational security. He had learned from the Coachella mistake. Future meetings with Amber would be completely private, their public interactions limited to professional settings that couldn't be misinterpreted. The app launch would proceed on schedule, and once the business was stable, he could address the Sophia situation with the financial resources to ensure a favorable divorce settlement. The false safety was complete, making what came next infinitely more devastating. Sophia's trust had been rebuilt through carefully orchestrated manipulation, setting her up for betrayals that would be far more calculated and cruel than anything she had experienced before. 3 weeks after their romantic Napa Valley reconciliation, Sophia was folding tiny onesies in the nursery when her phone exploded with notifications. The sound was overwhelming text messages, missed calls, social media alerts, email notifications, all coming in rapid succession like digital gunfire. Her heart rate spiked immediately, the familiar anxiety of the Coachella incident flooding back through her system. The first message was from her college roommate Sarah, now a successful divorce attorney in San Francisco. "Sophia, call me immediately. I'm seeing something online that you need to know about right now." With trembling fingers that barely responded to her mental commands, Sophia opened Twitter to find her name trending alongside her husband's. Not for anything positive, not for their business success or charitable contributions, but for something that made her stomach drop to her feet. The video was crystal clear, shot in high definition from multiple angles by professional cameras at the Silicon Valley Innovation Conference. Mason stood on stage accepting an award for Most Promising Startup of the Year. But instead of thanking his investors, his development team, or even his wife, he had pulled Amber Collins from the audience. "I have to thank my incredible business partner, Amber Collins." His voice boomed through the conference speakers with unmistakable pride. "She's been the inspiration behind everything we built together. None of this would be possible without her vision, her creativity, her unwavering support." The audience had applauded politely, assuming they were witnessing a standard professional acknowledgement between business partners, but the kiss that followed left absolutely no room for misinterpretation. Mason cupped Amber's face in his hands and kissed her with passionate intensity. The kind of kiss reserved for lovers, not colleagues. The kiss lasted 8 seconds. Sophia knew because she counted every one of them as she watched her marriage implode in real time across multiple social media platforms. 8 seconds that destroyed months of carefully rebuilt trust. 8 seconds that revealed the truth about Mason's recent transformation. Within an hour, the hashtag Mason and Amber was trending nationally. The video had been reposted, analyzed, and commented on by thousands of people who seemed to take genuine pleasure in the spectacle of a pregnant woman's public humiliation. The comments were merciless in their cruelty. "His pregnant wife must be watching this right now. How absolutely humiliating for the woman at home. Rich men have no shame when it comes to trading up. She's probably seeing this the same time as everyone else." Sophia sat on the nursery floor, surrounded by carefully folded baby clothes that represented her dreams of a happy family, watching strangers dissect her personal tragedy for entertainment. The viral nature of Mason's betrayal made it infinitely worse than private infidelity. This wasn't just adultery, it was public execution of her dignity. The cramps started immediately. sharp pains shooting through her abdomen that made her double over in agony. At 7 months pregnant, any unusual pain was terrifying, but the stress-induced contractions felt like her body was rejecting the very idea of bringing Mason's child into this nightmare. Her phone rang with Mason's ringtone, the sound she had once associated with love and security, now triggering pure panic. "Sophia, listen to me. I can explain everything," he said before she could speak, his voice tight with barely controlled desperation. "Explain what exactly?" Her voice was surprisingly steady despite the physical pain radiating through her torso. "Explain kissing another woman on live television while your pregnant wife sits at home. Explain calling her your inspiration while I'm carrying your child. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. The moment got away from me. Amber got caught up in the excitement of the award, and the cameras made it look more intimate than it actually was. Even now, even with high-definition video evidence viewed by hundreds of thousands of people, he was gaslighting her, making it about camera angles and misinterpretation rather than his deliberate choice to publicly claim another woman while his wife carried his child. Mason, you kissed her, passionately, on stage, in front of everyone, while calling her your inspiration. There's no camera angle that explains that away. You're being dramatic, Sophia." It was a moment of professional celebration that got blown completely out of proportion by social media. You know how these things work. Everything gets twisted online. The cramps intensified, forcing Sophia to grip the nursery dresser for support. "I think something's wrong with the baby. I think the stress is affecting the baby. These pains are getting worse." For the first time since the call began, Mason's voice changed, taking on a note of genuine concern that reminded her of the man she thought she had married. "What kind of pains are they? Regular? How long have you been having them?" "Sharp pains in my abdomen. They started when I saw the video. I think I might be having contractions." "Call 911 right now. Don't wait. Don't try to drive yourself. I'm leaving the conference and heading straight to the hospital." Sophia managed to call emergency services before the contractions became too intense to speak coherently. As she waited for paramedics, she couldn't stop thinking about the comments section, the thousands of strangers who had witnessed her humiliation and seemed to enjoy her pain. The ambulance arrived within 12 minutes that felt like hours. As paramedics helped her onto a stretcher, asking rapid-fire questions about her pain levels and medical history, Sophia's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, rushed over with genuine concern etched across her elderly features. "Honey, I saw the news online. I'm so sorry you're going through this. That man doesn't deserve you or that precious baby." Even her 70-year-old neighbor had seen the viral video. The humiliation was complete and inescapable. Every person in Sophia's life now knew that her husband was publicly cheating on her while she carried his child. There was nowhere to hide from the shame. During the ambulance ride, with monitors tracking both her heart rate and the baby's, Sophia's phone continued buzzing with notifications she was afraid to check. The story was spreading beyond social media into mainstream news outlets, entertainment blogs, and business publications. Tech billionaire's public affair goes viral while pregnant wife hospitalized, read one headline that a paramedic accidentally let her see while checking her phone for emergency contacts. Her private pain had become public entertainment, and there was absolutely no way to make it stop. The woman who had once planned quiet family dinners was now the subject of international gossip. Her marriage dissected by strangers who treated her suffering like recreational reading. The contractions were getting stronger and more regular, suggesting that her body was preparing to deliver their son 2 months early because of the stress her husband had caused. The medical team worked quickly to stabilize both mother and baby, but the damage to Sophia's sense of safety and security was already complete. This was her second crushing defeat, and it was happening in front of the entire internet. Mason had not only betrayed her privately, but had humiliated her publicly on a scale she never could have imagined. The man who had promised to love and protect her had turned her into a viral cautionary tale about trusting unfaithful husbands. As the ambulance pulled into Stanford Medical Center, Sophia closed her eyes and tried to focus on her baby's survival rather than her marriage's very public destruction. But the cruel reality was inescapable. Millions of people were watching her personal tragedy unfold in real time, and many seemed to find it entertaining rather than heartbreaking. The labor and delivery floor at Stanford Medical Center had never experienced anything like the media circus that erupted around Sophia's emergency admission. Within 2 hours of her arrival, reporters had gathered outside the hospital's main entrance. Satellite trucks lined the medical complex's parking areas, and security guards were stationed at every elevator bank to prevent unauthorized access to the maternity ward. The irony was not lost on the nursing staff. A woman's medical emergency had become breaking news entertainment because her husband couldn't keep his affairs private. Senior nurses who had delivered thousands of babies whispered among themselves about the cruelty of turning childbirth into a spectacle. Sophia labored for 18 grueling hours, while medications dripped through IV lines. Medical teams worked around the clock to prevent premature delivery, and her body fought desperately to keep her son safe for 2 more months. The stress had triggered a cascade of complications that couldn't be easily reversed: elevated blood pressure, irregular contractions, and signs that the baby was experiencing distress. Dr. Elena Martinez, the attending obstetrician who had delivered celebrity babies and handled high-profile medical situations, had never seen a case where public humiliation had so directly caused pregnancy complications. "Mrs. Blackwell," she explained during one of their consultations, "the level of stress hormones in your system is affecting both you and the baby. We need to do everything possible to create a calm environment for the remainder of your pregnancy." But creating calm was impossible when Mason arrived at the hospital 3 hours after Sophia's admission, and he wasn't alone. Amber Collins walked beside him through the maternity ward doors, her red hair perfectly styled, her outfit chosen for maximum visual impact, claiming she was there for moral support during this incredibly difficult time. The nursing staff exchanged looks of barely concealed disgust. The woman whose public affair had caused their patient's medical emergency was now positioning herself as a source of comfort and support. It was a level of audacity that shocked even experienced healthcare professionals. Dr. Martinez immediately implemented visitor restrictions, requesting that only immediate family members remain in the birthing suite. But Mason, leveraging his wealth and the hospital's dependence on major donors, had somehow convinced the administration that Amber was a close family friend whose presence was medically beneficial for reducing his stress levels. The cruel irony was breathtaking. The woman whose affair had triggered Sophia's premature labor was now being officially recognized as essential for the family's emotional well-being. "Get her out of here," Sophia managed between contractions, her voice hoarse from hours of pain. "Get her away from my baby, please." Sophia, you need to be reasonable," Mason replied with maddening calm, as if his wife's medical crisis was simply another business problem requiring rational management. "Amber is here to support both of us through this situation. You need to focus on staying calm for the baby's sake." Even in the delivery room, surrounded by medical equipment monitoring their child's distress, Mason was gaslighting her. Even while she fought to prevent their son from being born dangerously premature, he was more concerned with managing his affair than addressing his wife's legitimate medical and emotional needs. At 2:15 in the morning, despite every medical intervention available, Alexander Mason Blackwell entered the world weighing 3 pounds and 11 ounces. His tiny body was immediately covered in wires, tubes, and monitoring equipment before being rushed to the neonatal intensive care unit. While Sophia wept over their son's fragile condition and uncertain prognosis, Mason was on his phone in the hallway, closing a multi-million-dollar acquisition deal that couldn't wait until morning. The timing was just unfortunate, he explained to anyone who would listen, but business opportunities operated on their own schedules. "The Singapore investors are only available for 2 more hours, he told Dr. Martinez when she suggested he focus on his family's medical crisis. This deal could fund Alexander's medical care for the rest of his life. Amber, meanwhile, had positioned herself strategically in various corners of the maternity ward, taking carefully lit selfies with captions designed to generate maximum engagement. "Praying for baby Alexander tonight." Such a difficult time for the family. Sending love during this medical emergency. She was literally monetizing Sophia's medical trauma for social media content, treating their son's premature birth as an opportunity for increased follower engagement and brand visibility. "She's posting about our son," Sophia whispered desperately to her primary nurse, a compassionate woman named Jennifer, who had 3 children of her own. "She's taking pictures in our room while he's fighting for his life." Jennifer looked disgusted, but explained the hospital's legal limitations. "Without your husband's consent, I can't ask his designated support person to leave. I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackwell. This situation is highly unusual. The next morning brought a parade of pediatric specialists explaining Alexander's precarious condition in clinical detail that couldn't soften the terror. His lungs weren't fully developed, requiring mechanical ventilation. His immune system was compromised, making infection a constant threat. His digestive system wasn't ready for normal feeding, requiring specialized nutrition through IV lines. Each medical consultation demanded both parents' complete attention and understanding. But Mason divided his focus between his phone and half-hearted participation in discussions about their son's survival. When Dr. Sarah Kim, the neonatal intensive care specialist, explained the risks of respiratory distress syndrome and the possibility of long-term developmental complications, Mason interrupted her mid-sentence to take a call about stock market fluctuations. "This is critically important," he said, stepping into the hallway while his premature son lay connected to life support systems. "The market doesn't pause for personal situations, and our investors are expecting updates." Sophia stared at her husband's retreating figure, realizing with crystalline clarity that he was treating their child's fight for life like an inconvenient interruption to his business schedule. The man who had once promised to love and protect their family was prioritizing profit margins over their son's survival odds. Amber followed Mason into the hallway, their voices carrying back into the NICU as they discussed dinner reservations and weekend travel plans. They were making romantic arrangements while Sophia's premature son required machines to breathe, just feet away from where his mother sat in exhausted horror. That evening, as Sophia maintained her vigil beside Alexander's incubator, watching mechanical ventilators breathe for her 3-pound son, she understood that Mason's betrayal had transcended emotional cruelty. His actions had directly endangered their child's life, and his response was to treat the medical crisis as a networking opportunity. The hospital staff observed it all with barely concealed contempt, but Sophia felt powerless to change anything fundamental about her situation. She was recovering from traumatic childbirth, terrified about her son's uncertain prognosis, and completely dependent financially on a man who had proven he would prioritize anything over his family's well-being. This was her second crushing defeat, made infinitely worse by the vulnerability of new motherhood and the terror of having a critically ill newborn whose father treated his medical emergency like a minor inconvenience to more important business matters. Alexander's traumatic premature birth seemed to shock Mason back to the reality of what his actions had cost their family. For 6 weeks following their son's discharge from the NICU, he transformed into the husband and father Sophia had desperately hoped he could become, attending to their fragile infant's needs with dedication that felt genuinely remorseful. Every morning, Mason arrived in the nursery before Sophia woke, quietly checking Alexander's breathing, adjusting his specialized humidifier, and recording detailed notes about feeding times and sleep patterns that their pediatrician had recommended for premature infants. He researched infant development with the same intensity he had once applied to business ventures, consulting multiple specialists and reading peer-reviewed studies about optimizing outcomes for early babies. "I almost lost everything that truly matters," he told Sophia one evening as they watched Alexander sleep peacefully in his specialized crib, free from the tubes and monitors that had sustained him for 2 months. "Our son, you, our family's future. I was completely selfish to risk it all for something that meant absolutely nothing." The vulnerability in Mason's voice seemed completely authentic. He spoke about the terror he had felt watching Alexander struggle to breathe, the guilt that had consumed him during those early weeks when their son's survival was uncertain. For the first time since she had known him, Mason appeared genuinely humbled by consequences he couldn't control or manipulate. When Alexander smiled for the first time at 8 weeks old, Mason wept with relief and joy that seemed impossible to fake. He documented every milestone obsessively, creating detailed photo albums and video recordings that suggested a man desperate to prove his commitment to fatherhood. "I want to try couples therapy," he announced one morning over breakfast, his voice carrying a seriousness Sophia hadn't heard in months. "Not because we have to, not because you're demanding it, but because I need to understand how I let my priorities become so twisted that I nearly destroyed my family." Dr. Rebecca Chen, their therapist, was genuinely impressed by Mason's apparent commitment to personal transformation. During their initial consultation, he spoke with remarkable insight about his character flaws, his fear of emotional intimacy, and his tendency to compartmentalize relationships in ways that had allowed him to justify betraying his wife. I've spent my entire adult life believing that success in business could compensate for failures in personal relationships, he explained during their third session, reaching for Sophia's hand with what appeared to be genuine remorse. I treated our marriage like another deal to be managed rather than the most important relationship in my life. Mason's therapy breakthrough seemed to address exactly the issues that had destroyed Sophia's trust. He acknowledged using work as an escape from the responsibilities of marriage and impending fatherhood. He admitted that his affair with Amber had been an attempt to avoid dealing with his fears about becoming a parent. When Sophia got pregnant, I panicked, he continued, his voice thick with emotion that seemed impossible to fabricate. Instead of talking about my fears, I ran toward distractions that made me feel like the person I used to be before I had real responsibilities. Dr. Chen guided them through exercises designed to rebuild communication and trust gradually. Mason participated with enthusiasm that felt authentic, completing homework assignments about emotional availability and practicing active listening techniques that created genuine moments of connection between them. For the first time in over a year, Sophia began to feel hopeful about their future. Mason's transformation wasn't sudden or performative. It was gradual, consistent, and backed up by behavioral changes that suggested genuine character growth rather than temporary manipulation. Mason even suggested they renew their wedding vows once Alexander was healthy enough to attend the ceremony. I want to make promises I actually understand how to keep this time, he said, looking directly into Sophia's eyes with sincerity that felt completely real. I want our son to grow up seeing what a healthy marriage looks like. The public narrative supported their reconciliation beautifully. Mason's social media showed a devoted father learning to care for his premature son, sharing educational content about NICU experiences and advocating for better support systems for families with medically fragile infants. Business publications ran articles about how parenthood had shifted his priorities, praising his decision to reduce his travel schedule to focus on family responsibilities. Sophia's father, Frank, visited from Denver and observed the changes with cautious optimism. Mason seemed more grounded, more present in conversations, genuinely focused on his family's well-being, rather than constantly managing his image or pursuing the next business opportunity. Maybe having Alexander arrive early was the wake-up call he needed, Frank told Sophia privately during one of their walks through the neighborhood. Some men need to almost lose everything before they can appreciate what they actually have. But what none of them knew was that Mason's transformation was entirely performative, designed to rebuild Sophia's trust while he maintained his affair with increasingly sophisticated operational security. While he attended therapy sessions and played the devoted father during daylight hours, he was still meeting Amber every Thursday evening under the carefully constructed pretense of essential investor meetings. The penthouse apartment he had purchased through a shell company remained active, with monthly payments disguised as consulting fees paid to one of Amber's fictitious business entities. Her lifestyle and career development continued to be funded through carefully laundered business expenses that would be nearly impossible to trace without forensic accounting. Most dangerously for their family's future, Amber was now 12 weeks pregnant with what she insisted was Mason's second child. Mason had managed to compartmentalize this reality so effectively that he could express genuine love for Alexander while planning to abandon him for a newer family that wouldn't carry the complicated history of his previous betrayals. I think we're actually going to make it through this, Sophia confided to Sarah during one of their weekly phone calls, her voice carrying hope that had been absent for months. He's become the man I always believed he could be. Just maybe needed Alexander's medical crisis to show him what actually matters. Sarah, whose divorce law practice had given her extensive experience with manipulative partners, kept her concerns to herself but remained skeptical about Mason's sudden personality transformation. In her professional experience, men who could lie as convincingly as Mason rarely developed genuine remorse. They just became more sophisticated in their deception. Meanwhile, Amber was growing increasingly impatient with the secrecy surrounding their relationship and her pregnancy. She demanded more public acknowledgement, more financial security, and clearer timelines for when Mason would leave his wife and legitimize their relationship. The carefully constructed facade that had given Sophia hope was about to explode in ways that would make his previous betrayals seem minor by comparison. This time, the destruction would be total, systematic, and designed to leave Sophia with no resources to fight back. The explosion that would destroy Sophia's rebuilt trust came on a Tuesday morning when Alexander was 4 months old and finally sleeping through the night. Sophia was preparing his morning bottle in their kitchen, enjoying the peaceful routine of early motherhood, when her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Your husband has been paying my rent for 14 months straight. Thought you should see this before it goes public tomorrow." Attached was a screenshot of a bank transfer from Mason's personal checking account to someone listed as A. Collins, showing a monthly payment of $4,800 with memo lines reading consulting services and business development costs. Before Sophia could fully process the implications, a second message arrived with a link to Amber Collins' Instagram story. The video was devastating in its casual cruelty. Amber in a medical office, holding an ultrasound photo with obvious excitement, text overlay reading, 16 weeks and counting, "Can't wait for Daddy Mason to make this official." Sophia's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped Alexander's bottle. Mason had not only continued his affair throughout their months of couples therapy, but had gotten his mistress pregnant while learning to care for their premature son and making promises about renewed commitment to their marriage. The timeline was brutal to calculate. Amber had conceived during the same period when Mason was attending NICU parent education classes, learning to change Alexander's specialized diapers, and expressing gratitude for his family's survival. While Sophia was trusting his transformation and rebuilding her emotional connection to him, he was creating a second family that would inevitably replace them. Mason chose that exact moment to walk into the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, discussing their weekend plans to visit his parents with the casual enthusiasm of a man whose double life remained perfectly compartmentalized. "Morning. Beautiful. Alexander, sleep okay last night? I was thinking we could drive up to Sonoma on Saturday if he's up for the car ride." He stopped mid-sentence when he registered Sophia's expression and the phone trembling in her hands. His face went through the now familiar sequence of micro-expressions: manufactured surprise, rapid calculation, then something that almost looked like relief at finally being caught. "What's wrong? Babe, is everything okay?" Wordlessly, Sophia turned her phone screen toward him, displaying both the bank transfer and Amber's pregnancy announcement. Mason's careful mask slipped completely, revealing the calculating strategist beneath the devoted husband performance. "Sophia, I need you to understand that this situation is incredibly complicated." "Complicated?" Her voice was surprisingly steady despite the rage building in her chest. "You've been funding your mistress's lifestyle while we were in couples therapy, and she's pregnant with your child. What exactly is complicated about that level of betrayal?" Mason sat down heavily, running both hands through his hair in the gesture she now recognized as his tell for being caught in lies too large to explain away with charm. "The rent payments started before Alexander's medical crisis. I was trying to end the relationship gradually without causing unnecessary drama that could affect the business. And the pregnancy situation, she claims it's mine, but paternity isn't confirmed. Were you having unprotected sex with her while I was breastfeeding our premature son, Mason? While you were attending therapy and promising to rebuild our marriage?" The question hung in their kitchen like toxic gas. Mason's silence confirmed what Sophia already knew, but had been afraid to articulate. All those Thursday night investor meetings that suddenly became essential, all those weekend business trips that couldn't be rescheduled. You were maintaining a complete second life while I was learning to trust you again. It's not what you think, Sophia. She's been trying to manipulate me with this pregnancy claim, using it as leverage to demand more money and public recognition. I never intended for any of this to happen. Even now, confronted with evidence of systematic deception, he was deflecting responsibility. The pregnancy was Amber's manipulation, not his choice. The ongoing affair was something that had happened to him rather than something he had actively maintained through months of lies. Sophia looked down at Alexander, peacefully drinking his bottle, unaware that his father had spent months planning to abandon their family for a newer version that wouldn't carry the complicated history of his previous betrayals. "How long were you planning to keep this up until she gave birth? Until you had to choose between two children, until I discovered it, accidentally, like I did today. I was trying to develop an exit strategy that wouldn't destroy everything we've rebuilt together. The therapy was helping us. Sophia, our connection was getting stronger. I thought maybe I could resolve the Amber situation without it affecting our family. By lying to our therapist, by making me believe you had genuinely changed, by letting me fall in love with you all over again while you were creating another family behind my back. The betrayal felt deeper than his original affair because it had been hidden behind such convincing evidence of character growth. Every moment of joy and connection during their reconciliation had been built on active deception. Mason hadn't just cheated, he had orchestrated an elaborate psychological campaign designed to rebuild her trust while he systematically betrayed it. And the money, Mason. You've been spending thousands of dollars every month on another woman while telling me we need to be careful about expenses because of Alexander's medical bills. This was when the truly devastating financial reality began to emerge. Mason's support of Amber extended far beyond rent payments. Credit card statements revealed designer shopping sprees, luxury spa treatments, expensive dinners at restaurants Sophia hadn't been to in over a year. He had been maintaining Amber's lifestyle at a level that exceeded what he spent on his own wife and child. Worse, when Sophia tried to access their joint accounts to understand the full scope of his financial deception, she discovered that Mason had systematically moved their assets beyond her reach. Savings accounts required both signatures to access, but only his approval to transfer funds. Investment accounts had been restructured with his business partner as the secondary authorized user, rather than Sophia. I need to hire a lawyer. Mason, I need to understand what you've done to our finances and what rights I have to protect Alexander's future. Sophia, let's not make any hasty decisions while emotions are running high. Think about what divorce would mean for Alexander's stability, his medical care, his future educational opportunities. The threat was subtle but unmistakable: cooperate with his arrangement or risk their son's well-being. Mason had weaponized every aspect of their shared life, their home, their finances, their child's medical needs, to make leaving seem impossible and staying seem like the only rational choice for a responsible mother. This was Sophia's third crushing defeat, and it was the most devastating because it revealed that months of apparent growth and reconciliation had been nothing more than sophisticated manipulation designed to prevent her from protecting herself and their son from his fundamental inability to commit to their family. The man she had married, fallen in love with again, and trusted with their child's future was not just unfaithful, but calculating, cruel in ways that made his previous betrayals seem almost innocent by comparison. Within 48 hours of discovering Amber's pregnancy, Sophia learned that her financial situation was far worse than simple marital betrayal. Every attempt to protect herself legally revealed another layer of Mason's calculated strategy to ensure she could never leave him, no matter how badly he treated their family. When she called their bank to discuss accessing their joint savings account, she was informed that Mason had restructured the account 3 months earlier, requiring both signatures for any withdrawals, but allowing him unilateral authority to transfer funds to approved investment vehicles. Mrs. Blackwell, your husband indicated that these changes were necessary to protect family assets from potential business liability issues, the customer service representative explained. The account structure is designed to prevent unauthorized access during legal complications. What Mason hadn't told her was that he had transferred most of their liquid assets to offshore investment accounts that she couldn't access without his cooperation. The joint account that once contained their emergency fund now held exactly enough to cover monthly household expenses, giving him complete control over any significant financial decisions. Her personal credit cards were suddenly declined when she tried to pay for groceries in Alexander's formula. When she called the credit card companies, she learned that Mason had reported potential fraudulent activity on their accounts, resulting in all cards being canceled and new ones issued exclusively to his business address. Mr. Blackwell informed us that there might be unauthorized usage patterns. A credit card security specialist explained, all existing cards were deactivated for your protection, and replacement cards have been sent to the secure address he provided. But Mason hadn't provided their home address. He had directed all replacement cards to his company's offices, effectively cutting off Sophia's access to their credit accounts while maintaining his own ability to make purchases. The trap was masterfully constructed. Sophia had no income of her own because she had left her successful marketing career to support Mason's business ambitions and manage their household during her high-risk pregnancy. Their house was titled solely in Mason's name, purchased before their marriage with a prenuptial agreement that protected his assets while leaving her with no ownership stake in their primary residence. Even Alexander's medical care was processed through Mason's company health insurance policy, giving him potential leverage over their son's ongoing treatment for respiratory issues related to his premature birth. If Sophia filed for divorce, Mason could argue that maintaining family health coverage required preserving their marriage. I can't even buy my son formula if you decide to cut me off completely, Sophia realized with growing panic during their confrontation about the financial arrangements. You've made me completely dependent on your cooperation for everything. Mason's response revealed the calculated nature of his strategy. I've been protecting our family's financial future. Sophia, business partnerships require careful asset management. Everything I've done has been designed to ensure Alexander's long-term security. The manipulation was breathtaking in its completeness. He had engineered a financial crisis that made divorce seem potentially devastating for their son, then positioned himself as the reasonable parent who wanted to avoid disrupting Alexander's stability and medical care. Sarah, calling from San Francisco after Sophia described her situation, was furious about the systematic nature of Mason's financial abuse. This isn't accidental, Sophia. He's created perfect economic control. Every lawyer in Silicon Valley is going to want significant retainers to take on someone with Mason's resources, and he's made sure you can't afford legal representation. The retainers that divorce attorneys were quoting range from $25,000 to $60,000 just to begin proceedings against someone of Mason's financial sophistication. Even attorneys who specialized in high-conflict divorces were reluctant to take on cases where the opposing party had demonstrated willingness to use financial manipulation as a weapon. Without substantial upfront payment, it's difficult to compete against someone who can outspend you 10-to-1 on legal strategy. One attorney explained during a consultation that Sophia couldn't afford to extend beyond the initial meeting. Mason seemed to understand his position of power perfectly. He returned home that evening with takeout from Sophia's favorite restaurant in Flowers, acting as though they had simply experienced a minor disagreement that could be resolved through romantic gestures and reasonable negotiation. I know you're upset, and I understand why, he began, arranging the food on their dining room table as if preparing for a pleasant family dinner. But we need to approach this situation rationally, thinking about Alexander's best interests rather than letting emotions drive our decisions. What exactly are you proposing? Sophia asked, too emotionally exhausted to fight the obvious manipulation tactics. I'm proposing we stay married and handle the Amber situation like mature adults. Lots of successful couples work through infidelity. We can create boundaries that work for everyone while maintaining the stability Alexander needs for his development. He was suggesting she accept a polygamous arrangement disguised as a progressive marriage. Accept his pregnant mistress as a permanent fixture in their lives while maintaining the public facade of a happy family that would protect his business reputation and her social standing. And if I refuse, if I insist on divorce despite the financial complications, then we'll both lose everything we've worked to build. The house will have to be sold to divide assets. Alexander's medical care could be interrupted by insurance changes. Legal fees will consume resources that should go toward his future education and development. The threat was delivered with calm reasonableness, as if he were simply explaining natural consequences rather than articulating his strategy to force her compliance through economic terrorism. That night, lying beside their sleeping son, Sophia realized she was facing an impossible choice between her dignity and her child's immediate welfare. Mason had engineered the situation perfectly to make resistance seem selfish and surrender seem like responsible parenting. But as she listened to Alexander's peaceful breathing and felt his tiny hand grip her finger in sleep, Sophia began to understand that accepting Mason's arrangement would teach their son that women existed to tolerate men's betrayals in exchange for financial security. The lessons she would be teaching about relationships and self-respect could damage Alexander's character development more than any temporary financial hardship. Somewhere in the darkness of their nursery, surrounded by the baby furniture that Mason had helped her assemble during their reconciliation, Sophia began to realize that this level of calculated cruelty required a response that matched its sophistication. She was facing psychological warfare designed to break her spirit completely, and surrender would destroy her son's future understanding of healthy relationships even more thoroughly than the fight to escape would disrupt his immediate comfort. Sophia's salvation began with an unexpected phone call from Marcus Torres, an investigative journalist with the San Francisco Chronicle who specialized in exposing corruption within Silicon Valley's startup ecosystem. Marcus had been tracking Mason's company for 6 months as part of a broader investigation into financial irregularities among venture-funded tech companies. Mrs. Blackwell, I've been following your husband's business operations, and I believe you might have information that could help expose some serious criminal activity, Marcus explained during their initial conversation. Would you be willing to meet with me confidentially to discuss what you might know about his financial practices? Marcus had noticed discrepancies in Mason's public financial filings, inconsistencies between reported revenues and actual business operations that suggested systematic fraud designed to mislead investors about the company's profitability and growth potential. When Sophia's personal story went viral, Marcus realized that Mason's professional recklessness might extend to his business dealings. Men who believed themselves above moral consequences in their personal lives often demonstrated the same arrogance in their financial management. The meeting was arranged at a small coffee shop in downtown Palo Alto, far from Mason's usual business district. Marcus spread financial documents across their corner table, highlighting irregularities that meant nothing to Sophia but clearly represented significant legal violations to someone with his investigative experience. Your husband's company has been reporting consulting fees and business development costs that don't correspond to any identifiable services or measurable outcomes, Marcus explained, pointing to highlighted entries in official documents. These payments look suspiciously like personal expenses being disguised as legitimate business costs. The revelation was staggering. Mason's monthly payments to Amber weren't just personal betrayal, they represented investor fraud that violated federal securities laws and could result in criminal prosecution rather than simple divorce proceedings. If I can prove that he systematically used investor capital to fund his personal lifestyle, including supporting his mistress, the Securities and Exchange Commission will investigate, and the FBI will likely file criminal charges. Marcus continued. That level of financial crime carries prison sentences and complete asset forfeiture. For the first time in months, Sophia felt something that resembled hope, not for her marriage, which was clearly beyond salvation, but for her ability to escape Mason's financial control and protect Alexander's future from his father's criminal behavior. Sarah drove down from San Francisco that same evening, bringing with her years of experience handling complex divorce cases involving financial fraud. The three of them developed a strategy that would protect Sophia legally while gathering evidence of Mason's crimes. The key is documenting everything he's told you about business expenses, investor meetings, and company finances, Sarah explained. If he's been mixing personal and business funds, there will be patterns we can identify and federal investigators can prosecute. But the plan required Sophia to maintain the appearance of marital normalcy while secretly documenting Mason's activities. She would need to photograph financial documents when possible, record conversations that revealed his knowledge of fraudulent practices, and create a detailed timeline of his deceptive behaviors. Are you prepared for the level of public exposure this investigation will generate? Marcus asked seriously. When this story breaks, it's going to be national news. Mason's crimes, his affairs, the way he's manipulated you financially, everything will be public knowledge. Sophia thought about the months of humiliation she had already endured, the viral videos that had made her personal pain into public entertainment, the comments sections filled with strangers mocking her situation. She thought about Alexander, who would someday need to understand why his mother had fought to protect their family from his father's destructive choices. I'm tired of being the victim in someone else's story, she said with growing conviction. If exposing the truth helps other women recognize financial abuse before they're trapped, then I'm prepared for whatever comes next. The alliance between Sophia, Sarah, and Marcus represented something Mason had never anticipated, his victims fighting back with professional expertise and legal resources. More importantly, they were approaching his crimes from multiple angles simultaneously, making it impossible for him to control the narrative or manipulate the outcome. Over the following weeks, Sophia carefully documented Mason's criminal behavior while maintaining the facade of their troubled marriage. She photographed bank statements that showed systematic asset transfers, recorded phone conversations where Mason discussed using company funds for personal expenses, and created detailed notes about his admissions regarding financial irregularities. The investigation revealed that Mason's fraud extended far beyond supporting his affair. He had been inflating revenue reports to investors, creating fictitious consulting contracts to justify excessive executive compensation, and using company credit cards for personal travel and entertainment that had no business purpose. This isn't just adultery or financial abuse, Marcus explained after reviewing the evidence Sophia had gathered. This is systematic investor fraud that could send him to federal prison for 15 to 20 years. For the first time since discovering Mason's betrayal, Sophia began to feel that justice was possible and that Alexander's future could be protected from his father's criminal influence. She was no longer just enduring Mason's manipulation. She was actively working to end it on terms that would ensure he could never threaten their family again. The federal investigation would take months to complete, but Sophia now had hope that the man who had tried to trap her through financial abuse would ultimately be destroyed by his own criminal arrogance. His systematic betrayal of investors would become the weapon that liberated her from his systematic betrayal of their marriage. The courthouse in San Jose had never hosted a drama quite like the one that unfolded on the morning of March 15th. What Mason expected to be a routine divorce hearing where he could control the narrative and minimize his financial exposure instead became the stage for his complete professional and personal destruction. Mason arrived with his team of 4 expensive attorneys, all focused on portraying Sophia as an unstable mother whose postpartum emotional issues made her unsuitable for significant custody arrangements. Their strategy was straightforward: paint Mason as the stable, financially successful parent while suggesting that Sophia's reaction to his infidelity demonstrated mental health problems that could endanger their son. Amber Collins sat prominently in the gallery behind Mason, her pregnancy now visible at 24 weeks. Live streaming the proceedings on Instagram with #DaddyDrama and encouraging her followers to support Mason against his crazy ex-wife's unreasonable demands. She had positioned herself as the victim of Sophia's jealousy rather than acknowledging her role in destroying a family. "Your Honor," Mason's lead attorney began with practiced confidence, "my client has provided continuous financial and emotional support for his family, despite his wife's increasing instability following their son's traumatic premature birth. We're seeking joint custody arrangements that prioritize the child's needs while recognizing Mr. Blackwell's superior financial resources." The settlement offer was designed to be insulting minimal spousal support, shared custody that would give Mason effective control over Alexander's schedule and medical decisions, and no claim to assets that Mason had systematically moved beyond Sophia's reach through offshore financial arrangements. Sophia sat with Sarah and a local attorney they had managed to retain using funds borrowed against her father's construction business, waiting for the moment when Marcus's federal investigation would intersect with the family court proceedings. She looked calm and composed, nothing like the unstable woman Mason's attorneys were describing. At exactly 10:30, the courtroom doors opened with dramatic timing that Marcus had coordinated with federal investigators. FBI agent Rebecca Chen entered with 2 federal prosecutors, a team of forensic accountants, and warrants for Mason Blackwell's immediate arrest on multiple felony charges. "Mason Blackwell, you're under arrest for securities fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud investors," Agent Chen announced, her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent courtroom. The timing was perfect, coordinated with Marcus's publication of his comprehensive investigation in that morning's San Francisco Chronicle. The article detailed not just Mason's financial crimes, but the systematic way he had used investor money to fund his extramarital affairs while manipulating his wife through economic abuse. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Reporters who had come expecting a routine celebrity divorce found themselves documenting a federal criminal arrest. Mason's face drained of all color as Agent Chen read him his constitutional rights while his legal team scrambled to understand how their carefully planned strategy had just exploded. Amber's Instagram livestream captured her own mounting panic as she realized that her financial security was being led away in handcuffs. The comments on her feed turned vicious immediately. "Your sugar daddy is going to prison. Hope you saved some of that fraud money. Guess that baby won't have a college fund." The family court judge immediately suspended the divorce proceedings pending resolution of the criminal charges. But the damage to Mason's credibility and financial position was complete and irreversible. Within hours of his arrest, his company's assets were frozen, his personal accounts were under federal investigation, and his reputation was destroyed beyond any possibility of recovery. Marcus's article was devastating in its comprehensiveness. Silicon Valley CEO used investor funds to finance secret double life, detailed how Mason had systematically defrauded his business partners while psychologically manipulating his wife into accepting financial abuse. The story included quotes from Sophia about the systematic nature of economic manipulation in abusive relationships, positioning her as an advocate for other women rather than simply a victim of Mason's crimes. Her transformation from humiliated wife to empowered survivor was complete and public. Public reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly supportive of Sophia. Social media campaigns emerged with hashtags like Team Sophia and financial abuse awareness, turning her into a symbol of resilience for women escaping manipulative relationships. More importantly for Alexander's future, the FBI's asset recovery included returning funds that Mason had hidden in offshore accounts specifically to control Sophia. The money intended to trap her became evidence in the federal case, and she would be entitled to substantial restitution as a victim of his financial crimes. Mrs. Blackwell. Agent Chen approached Sophia after Mason was processed and transported to federal detention. We want you to know that your cooperation with this investigation has been essential to protecting other potential victims. Your husband's crimes extended far beyond what he did to your family. The investigation revealed that Mason had defrauded investors of more than $18 million over 2 years, using sophisticated financial instruments to hide the systematic theft of funds intended for legitimate business development. Without Sophia's inside knowledge of his personal expenses and behavioral patterns, federal investigators might never have identified the full scope of his criminal enterprise. As Sophia left the courthouse with Alexander in her arms, she faced a crowd of reporters who wanted her reaction to her husband's arrest. Instead of hiding or deflecting questions, she spoke with clarity and strength that surprised even her supporters. No woman should have to endure financial manipulation to protect her children. I hope this case helps other families recognize economic abuse before they're completely trapped by it. The transformation was complete in public. Sophia was no longer Mason's victim, his wife, or a woman defined by his betrayals. She had become a survivor who helped expose serious crimes while protecting her son's future from his father's destructive criminal behavior. Her alliance with Marcus and Sarah had not only liberated her from Mason's control, but had created a model for how victims of sophisticated financial abuse could fight back using professional expertise and coordinated legal strategy. 18 months later, Sophia stood before an audience of 300 attorneys, social workers, and survivors at the National Conference on Economic Abuse in Domestic Relationships. Alexander, now a healthy and energetic 2-year-old, sat on her hip babbling cheerfully while she delivered the keynote address about recognizing financial manipulation in intimate relationships. Mason had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $22 million in restitution to defrauded investors and victims of his systematic financial crimes. The offshore accounts he had used to control Sophia were completely liquidated, providing her with enough resources to establish genuine financial independence for the first time since college. The most insidious aspect of economic abuse isn't the immediate financial control, Sophia explained to the attentive audience. It's the way it conditions victims to doubt their own judgment about everything, not just money. When someone systematically undermines your perception of reality, it affects your ability to trust yourself about any aspect of your life. The Sophia Reynolds Foundation, established with her portion of the federal restitution, provided legal assistance, financial counseling, and emergency support to women escaping economically abusive relationships. Her organization had already helped over 200 families navigate the complex process of documenting financial manipulation and accessing legal protection. I never imagined that surviving my marriage would prepare me to help other women recognize the warning signs of sophisticated manipulation, she continued. But sometimes our worst experiences become our greatest qualifications for preventing others from suffering similar trauma. Alexander clapped enthusiastically at the applause, drawing laughter from the audience and demonstrating the resilience that children could develop when protected from toxic relationship dynamics. His presence reminded everyone that healing was possible and that breaking cycles of abuse could protect future generations. Marcus Torres, whose Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation had exposed Mason's crimes as part of a broader pattern of Silicon Valley corruption, had become both a close friend and professional collaborator. Their working relationship had evolved into a romantic partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine commitment to justice for victims of powerful predators. Marcus taught me that telling the truth about abuse isn't just personal healing, Sophia explained to the conference audience. It's a form of public service that protects other potential victims from experiencing similar trauma. Sarah had relocated her family law practice to California, specializing in complex cases involving financial fraud and high-conflict divorces. Her expertise had become nationally recognized, and she frequently consulted on cases where traditional divorce procedures were inadequate for addressing sophisticated economic manipulation. The three of them had developed innovative legal strategies that combine family law, criminal investigation, and victim advocacy to address financial abuse comprehensively rather than treating it as a simple marital dispute. Frank Reynolds had sold his Denver construction company and moved to California to be closer to his daughter and grandson, using his business experience to help other families understand how financial manipulation worked and how to document it effectively for legal proceedings. My dad taught me that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when it's convenient, Sophia told the audience. It's about maintaining your values when maintaining them requires genuine sacrifice. Amber Collins had disappeared from social media entirely after Mason's arrest. Her pregnancy had been revealed as fabricated, staged with fake ultrasound images and carefully timed announcements designed to manipulate Mason's guilt about potentially abandoning another child. Her role as an active participant in defrauding investors had resulted in her own criminal prosecution and complete destruction of her influencer career. In the final moments of her keynote address, Sophia looked out at faces that reflected her own journey, women who had survived betrayal, manipulation, and systematic abuse, but had chosen to transform their pain into protection for others. We tell ourselves that love requires accepting unacceptable behavior, she concluded. But love without respect, honesty, and basic human decency isn't love at all. It's control wearing a prettier mask. When we stop accepting counterfeits, we create space for authentic relationships that actually support our growth and well-being. The standing ovation that followed felt like recognition, not just of her personal survival, but of the broader movement she had helped create to protect victims of sophisticated financial abuse. After the conference, as Sophia sat in her hotel room with Alexander playing quietly beside her, she reflected on the journey that had transformed her from an isolated victim into a nationally recognized advocate. The viral humiliation that had once devastated her had become a platform for helping thousands of women recognize and escape similar manipulation. Marcus arrived that evening with dinner from Alexander's favorite restaurant and updates about their upcoming wedding plans. Their relationship represented everything Masons had pretended to be genuine partnership, emotional support, and shared commitment to values that prioritize integrity over convenience. "Ready to go home tomorrow?" Marcus asked, settling beside them on the hotel sofa while Alexander climbed into his lap with complete trust. "More than ready," Sophia replied, watching the man she loved interact naturally with her son. "Alexander starts daycare next week, and I have 3 new cases to review for the foundation." The life she had built from the ashes of Mason's betrayal was fuller, more purposeful, and infinitely more authentic than the marriage she had once fought desperately to save. Justice had been served not just through criminal prosecution, but through her transformation from victim to advocate, ensuring that her suffering had prevented others from enduring similar manipulation. Sometimes the worst chapters of our lives become the foundation for writing better endings, not just for ourselves, but for everyone whose story intersects with ours. Sophia's journey from humiliation to empowerment had created ripple effects that would protect families she would never meet from predators she would never encounter. The story that began with viral betrayal had become a testament to the power of truth, the importance of professional alliances, and the possibility of rebuilding after even the most devastating manipulations. Her victory was complete. Mason was in prison. Alexander was thriving, and her work was protecting other families from similar destruction. Love had ultimately won, not the counterfeit version that required accepting abuse, but the authentic version that demanded and deserved respect, honesty, and genuine commitment to each other's well-being and growth. If this story opened your eyes to the reality of financial abuse or reminded you that no betrayal has to define your future, you're not alone in feeling that way. Thousands of women face similar manipulation every day, and sharing stories like Sophia's helps them recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Hit that like button if you believe every woman deserves better than accepting betrayal for financial security. Drop a comment below sharing what surprised you most about this story. Was it the FBI twist? the fake pregnancy, or something else entirely. And if you want to hear more stories about people who turn their worst moments into their greatest victories, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. We're building a community here that celebrates resilience, exposes manipulation, and proves that justice is always possible when victims refuse to stay silent. Your engagement helps these stories reach women who might need to hear them most. Sometimes the right story at the right moment can change someone's entire future. What will you do with the strength you found today?